Well, investors are increasingly showing confidence in Zambia's policy direction and its national stability. However, government introduced a new law that is aimed at monitoring the balance of payments in a transparent manner. And of course, now investors are on edge once again. For more on whether this law is going to impact investor confidence going forward, Brian Dlamini, country risk analyst at RMB, is joining me in studio. Thanks so much for joining us, Brian. So you've just come back from Lusaka. Before we get into this new law, just give us your sense as to how things are on the ground there. Anything that really stood out for you?
Well, coming from Lusaka, you still get the same feeling that overall that place is the economy is quite robust. Growth is still coming through, and the prospects are quite positive overall. But that said, like you've mentioned, there are some challenges insofar as investors understanding the implications of the new SI 32, Statutory Instrument 32. So that is a bit of a challenge at the moment for the outside investor.
I mean, just looking at this new law, basically saying within 60 days, an exporter has to remit the proceeds of those exports back to the central bank. I mean, what's your interpretation of what this is going to mean? How does it change the model that has traditionally existed, especially for the mining sector?
I think, well, one must just take a bit of a step back and try and articulate what the intention of government is, which is to target unscrupulous business practices or mines that don't pay taxes. So at a high level, government is trying to reconcile the amount of minerals exported with revenues that are coming out of those exports. So at a high level, that's what it aims to reconcile. I think then when
are there major discrepancies?
Perhaps, well, government certainly feels there is a leakage in the system. There's monies that, or rather, there's a disconnect between what is exported and what is actually generated in terms of tax revenues. And in closing that loop, they are introducing the balance of payments monitoring system, where basically all proceeds have to flow back into Zambia, be reconciled with an export tax certificate to say so much was exported in terms of quantity, so much has come in. Has the mine paid or declared the taxes as per regular tax practices or laws? And I think overall it's going to be a bit of a challenge to get used to how this law will work. But I mean, it's understood that the intentions of this law are largely good.
I mean, it makes sense, but there's some big mines that operate there, and some big mining companies. Glencore operates there. They have Apani copper mines. You've got Vedanta Resources, the Konkola copper mines there. First Quantum, Barrick Gold, some Chinese mines. Do you think that those mines are a little bit on edge right now about the change in the system? I mean, what type of response have the mines given?
The mines haven't given any public statements as such. I think everyone is still trying to understand this law. It was rather a rapid process in the way it was done. End of April, it got gazetted, and then within 2 weeks, it was already time for enforcement. And that didn't give everyone time to understand, and especially
and adapt. I mean,
and adapt.
That's scary that something is gazetted and 2 weeks later it's made into law, and of course that was just last week. Very little time for a company to actually make the necessary changes.
That is precisely the point, that it leaves people quite uncertain. But that said, I mean, government has postponed the time at which companies have to comply, which is July 2013 now. So that buys people time to engage with government and really find out what is the real story with this law, and how they can everyone can be on the same page. I think the other thing to remember is that it doesn't affect mines only, it affects the financial system, because the money needs to go now into Zambia, and basically banks there now have to also be on par with what government intends to do. And so do the mines, and so does everyone. So yes, there's challenges in understanding it. I think, going forward, the challenge for government would have to be one of communicating or phasing in these type of changes going forward.
I mean, as a country risk analyst, what would your assessment be of sentiment towards Zambia looking from the outside in, given the fact that there have been quite a few changes, whether the intention is good or bad? Companies operating in Zambia have had to adapt quite quickly.
Yes, I mean, this is one out of more than a handful of changes. We've seen minimum wages, we've seen fuel subsidy cuts, we've seen talks now of fertilizer subsidy cuts in the agricultural sector. So everything is kind of happening at the same time. That is leaving the outside investor with a bit of worry, because they don't have, I think, that vision, or in the horizon they cannot see what else is going to change. So yes, the sentiment is on more on the bearish side into, say, the short term, but I mean, investors have gone in for the long haul. If you've got a mine, unfortunately, it's a long-term project, or rather, fortunately for the country, it's a long-term project. So they know that bulk of the money is committed to Zambia.
Yeah.